Okay, I think Charlotte is going to talk to us. She's going to give us her 10-minute tale. And one of our songs today was, because she requested it, Victory in Jesus. Thanks.
Good morning. Good morning. Who here remembers reading quotes from that great American author, Mark Twain? Well, here are a few. The two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. If you tell the truth, you don't have anything to remember. Whenever you find yourself on the side of the majority, it is time to pause and reflect. Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness. It is better to keep your mouth closed and let people think you are a fool than to open it and remove all doubt. There are basically two types of people. People who accomplish things and people who claim to have accomplished things. The first group is less crowded. There is no distinctly American criminal class except for Congress. No sinner is ever saved after the first 20 minutes of a sermon. We do well here. When I was a child of 14, my father was so ignorant, I could hardly stand to have the old man around. But when I got to be 21, I was astonished at how much the old man had learned in 7 years. Well, sadly and embarrassingly, I can identify with that last quote, but I must have been a slow learner, because I admit I was much older than 21 when I realized what a courageous, hardworking, admirable, splendid, and loving person my father was. Let me tell you a few things about Daddy. He was born the fourth of 5 children in 1920 in Eatonton, Georgia. That location is where the book The Color Purple took place, in case you've heard of Eatonton. Daddy's daddy was a World War I veteran, farmer, and machinist at a small factory. Daddy's mother was a homemaker, and unlike my maternal grandmother, Grandmama Donaldson was a terrible cook. If I threw her burned biscuits at my brother, it would hurt him. And I would have to go and cut my own switch to be punished. When Daddy was in 7th grade, his father was involved in an accident at work and went immediately and permanently blind. There was no welfare or workman's compensation in America back in 1932, at the height of the Depression. My grandmother took in sewing, but it was not enough income to keep food on the table for a family of 5. The 2 oldest brothers were already out of the house and married with their own families to care for. Daddy was called on to leave school, where he had done very well, and find a way, during the Depression, mind you, to support my Aunt Ruby, Uncle Charles, Grandmama, and Granddaddy, and himself. He had a pet goat that he had to sell for groceries, and decades later, he would tear up at that recollection. After that, he picked up odd jobs, delivered groceries, farmed, and importantly, taught himself to fix cars. That skill saved the family from starvation. That natural ability became his livelihood. Daddy was doing well in his job of supporting his family, and in Georgia, he was what was called a shade tree mechanic. Along came World War II, and this man of the greatest generation was called to serve his country. By this time, my grandfather had passed away, and my grandmother had remarried, so she was not left in the cold. Daddy was quickly promoted to the head of the motor pool in the Rhineland and Austria, and I have since visited those areas in his memory. I love that I have seen the same rivers and mountains that he saw. His commanding officer would let no one touch his Jeep but Daddy. Daddy had to drive repaired vehicles behind the German lines at night on mountains without headlights. When he dropped off the repaired vehicles to the soldiers, he nursed the broken vehicles back to the motor pool. He told my mother that every day in the war he thought he would die. Like many veterans, he very rarely talked about the war. I believe I understand that. He did have his army buddies over sometimes, and remarkably, they found much to laugh about. However, Daddy made sure at school we never contributed to the Red Cross school drives to get our little white tin button. He did tell us that things marked not for sale and for the American soldiers were in fact only sold by the Red Cross to the soldiers. I am not being political, but Daddy was a truthful person. After the war, he came home and found his mother had drained his entire savings account. He had lived in Europe on practically no money and had sent almost everything to her over the years so he could use his nest egg to build a home and open an auto garage when he returned. He had to start over with nothing. I never forgave Grandmama, but Daddy did. He and my mother were married in 1946, and their 75th wedding anniversary was yesterday. I was a honeymoon baby, born exactly 9 months after their wedding day. Daddy built our first home with his own hands and with the help of his brother, my Uncle Charles. He also opened an auto garage and was soon rumored to be the best mechanic in Macon, Georgia, where my siblings and I were born. Then, scant few years later, Daddy used his VA points and got a job with the Department of Defense at Robins Air Force Base. He took a mechanical engineering test at Patrick Air Force Base and made the highest score ever recorded at that time. Not one ever to loaf around, he put his mechanical skills to work day and night. Daddy rose before 6 each morning, left for his job at 6:30, and arrived back home about 5. After supper, he worked until 2 in the morning at his auto garage. Obviously, over time, his health suffered, and we did not always see a lot of him. And when we did see him, he was often very tired and cranky. But he took his job as our provider very, very seriously. We never did without. We also never really took vacations when I was young because Daddy never stopped working. For some reason, my family did not have health insurance in their young married life. He proudly told all 4 of us kids that he paid in cash for each one of us born at the maternity ward. Mama verified that to be true. He was also a saver, and his passbook was something he was quite proud of. I think when you have been so broke, those passbooks, which are now gone the way of running boards on cars, were badges of honor. He was treated very well at our local bank. His siblings, family members always came to Daddy to borrow money when they were in a bind. I was proud that I only borrowed $150 from him in my early 20s and paid it back very quickly. He taught me that was the right thing to do. In small ways, I am proud of being like him. Our handwriting is almost exactly the same. In my long-time youthful belligerence, I thought he was old-fashioned and way too strict, did not understand me and my friends, and never took time for fun. But much later, I realized he had taught me so many worthwhile values. The value of a good day's work for a good day's pay, that being honest was the only way to go, to always welcome company for a visit, to treat others with respect. In the segregated American South, his best friend was a black man, and that life owed me nothing. My work ethic and those of all of his college-educated children was founded on his life model. When Daddy was only 59 years old, he was mugged and robbed and was found dead the next day behind a neighborhood store. The murderer was never found. It took me decades to really appreciate my daddy, but oh, my many stupid years. I love him, and I look forward to giving Daddy a huge hug in heaven one day. What a day of rejoicing that will be. His favorite hymn was Victory in Jesus, and I often heard him humming or singing it when I stopped by his garage to ask for the car keys and for gas money. Thank you, Robin, Rodrigo, and Songbird Doris, for letting me savor that sweet memory today. Besides Mark Twain, where I started out with his story, I found another quote by Ruth Wrinkle that seems to fit this story much better. Sometimes the poorest man leaves his children the richest inheritance. Thank you, Daddy. Well done. I love you.
I don't know about you, but I got tears streaming.
Yeah.
I remember, but I forgot. Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you. It was beautiful.